3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, I'm Plywood, and I have with me Turbo Dog. Say hello, Turbo Dog.
Hello, audience, for Metal Gear speedrunners for tactical fundraising action.
I'll be doing a run of Parasite Eve new game for all of you guys for the finale of this marathon. Thanks to all the people who've donated. We have closed the donation incentive for naming the main character, Aya Brea. Her name's gonna be Wendy, named after Roy's cat. So thanks again for all the donations. Let's get rolling in 3, 2, 1, go. Let's start like any good speedrun with a long cutscene that's unskippable.
So I guess we get an opportunity here if you want to kind of set the stage for what's happening for the beginning part of this game, or at least talk about the setting a little bit.
Yeah, this is I would say a non-traditional setting for a role-playing game. We are playing as a cop named Aya Brea, and she is going to the opera on Christmas Eve, I believe in the year 1997, with some schmuck, some blondie. They're going to the opera because she wanted to, though she doesn't really understand why. And it's all pretty and serene, you know, New York and Christmas, very nice. It's a very Christmassy game for sure. And we're going to exit the limousine and promptly equip our club just in case the guy gets a little bit too frisky, you know?
I would say that this is the second best piece of Christmas media available, right behind Die Hard.
I was about to say, I was hoping you were going to say Die Hard. So here's our protagonist. I'm going to make sure I don't do what I standardly do to quickly get through the naming process. This game, the text goes through pages. It doesn't scroll like a lot of RPGs, so you don't actually need to worry about names. Okay. W-E-N-D-Y.
So everybody remember to blow out Plywood on Twitter if he refers to Wendy Brea as Aya ever. Because now, canonically,
this is Wendy.
Wendy Brea.
Cops can't afford opera tickets? I think you'd be surprised. Though I think that the guy got the tickets for her.
So this is Carnegie Hall, and over the course of the game, we are going to be visiting a decent amount of actual New York landmarks. As Plywood mentioned, this is a modern setting to the game, especially at the time that it was created. And as he mentioned before, this is a pretty infrequent setting, right? So not like super futuristic, not post-apocalypse futuristic, and not like medieval times. Like, what are some games that you can think of that are like modern style RPGs? Be like Earthbound, like the
yeah,
Modern
Earthbound.
series?
Well, there's some that feature modern settings, but aren't primarily modern settings. Like Chrono Trigger does have a modern period, but it's
get
not
outta
really
here with that.
Yeah, I can't think of many role-playing games that really do feature a contemporary setting.
I mean, you could maybe argue something like FF6 and 7 on the outside.
Yeah. Those kind of fit the bill, right? But I would say this is probably the most
very much
grounded
pistols are used.
Yeah.
And
well, grounded, but it's also a sci-fi story. There's going to be some fantastical elements in this story. We do have magic at our disposal as Wendy.
So here we're seeing one of the all-time great openings for a video game. Turns out opera is a very dangerous place to be in any Square game. of this era, whether it's FF6 or this game or a variety of other games. FF9, another one. So, I mean, you could just go to Opera and then you're just on fire.
You're gonna need the understudies now for the next performance.
Also, note that Opera is very popular with the same 3 people in the crowd.
Yes.
But let's not think about that as you see these larger shots.
But yeah, definitely, I think one of the most memorable aspects of this game is this scene, especially this burning guy screaming at you. Bam. So yeah, the start of this game, got a couple cutscenes, but we're coming into the first battle of the game, which features its own unique battle system. Hasn't been replicated by a lot of games. Probably the closest would be Vagrant Story. That's a common connector in terms of the battle, but they're not quite the same. I haven't played Vagrant Story. I've seen a little bit of the gameplay, but it's not like one-to-one.
I would say the only thing that carries over is the potential to kind of target certain body parts depending on the fight in the sphere system, but I mean, they're still so far apart from one another once you get rid of those 2 commonalities.
So we're going to fight the actress on stage, Melissa, who apparently caused all this fire and torment. We got a crit. We can see that because of the yellow color on the damage. And the reason why we're using the club over our gun is because the active time bar increases faster with the melee weapon, and our gun is so weak at the start that there's really no good reason to use it.
Another side effect of this is this will also conserve ammo coming out of day 1, which is a slight concern depending on how well or poorly fights go on in the mid part of the game. So now that we've pummeled this woman to a paste on the stage of Carnegie Hall, we have a flashback which heads us to the hospital, and Aya doesn't really remember this super well. The actress herself has mentioned that she's like shocked that Aya is not just a pile of goo right now. But she kind of concludes that Aya's mitochondria are awakening or reacting to her. And if you don't know much about mitochondria, just know that they're an organelle inside the body that's used in energy production.
They're the powerhouse of the cell.
That's correct. They're going to use that term a lot in this. The basic premise that all you need to know is that they create energy inside the body, and they, for the purposes of this game, a lot of the powers that are attributed to monsters are due to the fact that the mitochondria are causing rapid evolution or producing energy in great amounts so that enemies can do like energy attacks. So that's the justification as to why enemies can shoot fireballs or shoot lightning. Another FF6 alumni here, the Opera Rat.
We're going to see this transformation scene, which I wish they did more of in this game. The transformations are pretty cool. Bit spooky, a bit horrifying, but keep in mind, people call this a horror RPG, but the back of the box calls it a cinematic RPG, not a horror RPG, but it definitely has horror influences and elements.
To briefly touch on it, this game is loosely the sequel to a movie of the same name, Parasite Eve, also a book that was released in Japan. For the purposes of the game, they're very loosely connected, to be completely honest, but this is kind of a licensed game as a result of that, which is really odd.
You need to drop this body to pick up a key off the burnt corpse, and that way we can enter this room, which is the dressing room for the actress on stage. And we learn that she's been having some medical problems, some pretty big medical problems, and was pressured, feeling the pressure of being the actress of this big opera production. Feeling like she's gonna die, taking medication.
Taking
pretty harsh
more
stuff.
and more medication as well as it's getting worse.
And keep in mind, I do have to mash through all text. It's not like an auto-scrolling text. You have to mash through the script.
On the upside, a lot of these text boxes are attached to animations in the game, so maybe the character has to like wave their arm or something before the next sentence will be displayed. So a lot of times you don't need to go completely crazy with your mashing. Just, you know, steady rhythm, nice and easy. Make sure you're clearing boxes as they come up. So
Melissa is transforming into her second form. Turbodog is commentating with me.
So I guess I can kind of discuss Eve 2 while Plywood's concentrating on this. So the premise of this is we can get up to 2 attacks on Eve 2. If we're ever too close to her when she has her turn, she will typically slap. If we're far away, she'll do the double laser attack that we can stand in between. So the key point here is that we can more easily dodge the laser, and the laser does far less damage than the slap does. So if we were to take a hit, we would want to take it from the laser. Plywood's doing a good job of trying to, what I call, threaten a lot of space, control a lot of space around his character with the club. The club has a very limited range, but if you position yourself in just the right ways, you can kind of catch Eve as she's moving around and still have enough time to get yourself out of melee and position well so that you aren't in danger. Typically you want to try to get crits in fights, but there is only so much that crits will help with a fight. So, you know, you want a certain amount of crits, but after that it's kind of irrelevant whether you get them or not. I believe I saw 2 crits that fight, which is, it's okay. Plywood preserved his health total quite well as well, so that means that he isn't going to have to worry about healing coming into the next screen. And we're going to start seeing some more sewer monsters. So I'll touch on sewer monsters real quick. The sewer monsters that are probably the most dangerous that we're going to run into are frogs. Frogs have very odd hitboxes, and their tongue attack occupies a huge amount of space and does quite a bit of damage. So it's a real challenge sometimes to get the club, this melee weapon, to connect with them in a game that's very much about shooting guns at long distance.
Just kind of try to position ourselves to avoid their flame attack. Sort of go around in a circle with all the rats. And yes, we will be going for the frog skip, which is a bit of a tough movement that we'll be doing in one of the next rooms. So here's the frog. We want to be on the right side of the frog when it tries to attack, because the tongue actually will miss on the other side, but I think there's like a weird thing where if you hit the frog while it has the tongue active, it'll still hurt you, which I think is what just happened to me. Yeah.
So Plywood elected to heal there, so you are going to see strategies that are very much marathon safe, because especially when you are trying to heavily optimize this game, the strategies you use are super unsafe and basically can fall apart at just the slightest bit of bad luck. So for example, with that frog, had that frog crit, Plywood would have been in serious danger of dying, and he knew that the frog's ATB was coming up, so he elected to heal there slightly instead. Coming into this room, we have actually a few hidden options for items. Plywood is going to hit the back of the room here, and in the chest there, he has the potential for a offense +1 or +2.
Got a 1.
+2 is like a 1 in 5 chance, give or take. There's another chest in this hidden room that has a chance for the same thing, 1 in 5 chance to get a +2. Okay, so we got 1/1, which is, it's fine. It's just, you know, we wish we would have had a little bit more effective power, but that's all right. We're going to probably hit the chest here to see if it drops a medicine 1. The other potential thing it can have is a bullet. bullet times 5, I think, or something.
I got ammo 6.
Ammo 6. And we're going to run into the double frog fight.
Oh, we skipped it.
So,
nice.
All right, nice. So Plywood basically abused the triggers for fights there to skip an encounter with 2 frogs. There is a little bit of intricacies to that, but since he skipped it over, we won't be covering that. So we chase Eve into the sewers here, and she is going to beat a hasty retreat while transforming a crocodile or an alligator in the sewers, which is clearly what happens in New York. There's just crocodiles and alligators everywhere in the sewers. At any place, go to Carnegie Hall, go into the sewer, and there's going to be a crocodile there.
They wanted to get the Mutant Ninja Turtles, but they couldn't get the licensing, so they elected for the Crocagator. And yes, these cutscenes are unskippable, so just enjoy them with us, everyone. Take a nice, make some tea, relax, enjoy the show. As she turns into goop and then immediately turns back into a human.
I think they did a pretty good job with these cutscenes, though. They're appropriately grotesque at times, and even though they went for a more realistic approach, you can still tell that they're relatively stylized, especially in facial features. Okay, so I guess I'll cover the mechanics of this fight also. This is something that can be pretty dangerous for the early game. So Plywood's going to have a 2-phase fight against this crocodile. The first phase is going to be dominated mostly by the tail attacks from the croc, either a melee attack or one where he shoots kind of waves of energy. Plywood's going to attempt to stay on the left here and time out his movement to the right so that he can dodge in between or in front of the sonic attacks or the green waves. And early melee there is kind of dangerous. Very important that Plywood menus to shoot the tail instead of the body, because the body will not take damage. Plywood's going to correctly heal up here for the purposes of safety. If he had cleanly hit that last attack, he could have maybe pushed it into the second phase early, but since he got kind of a glancing blow with a shot, which we'll cover later on, he had to spend an extra turn, so better to err on safety. Phase 2, once we've kind of disabled the tail, is all about just kind of dumping damage and avoiding the primary attacks of the boss, which is the flame breath there. That's kind of what you want to see, because it leaves him immobile for large amounts of time. Another thing it can do is charge and do a claw attack. Ooh, that's the first time I've seen that thing crit. But we get out of that fight and pick up a Kevlar vest. So there are 2 approaches to the second game that you can take. You can either equip the Kevlar vest, which is, I believe, what Plywood is going to do here. That'll give you slightly more defense going into day 2, but it won't have one of the special abilities on the other option. The other option would be the chemical vest, which has the ability, when you are hit to low health, to automatically use medicine. We'll cover more of the mechanics with the chemical vests later on in day 3 when we pick up another version of that. But for now, we're kind of cleaning up day 1. If you want to kind of talk about your thoughts on day 1 or just what's happening in the story at large, Plywood, feel free.
Yeah, we just witnessed some police brutality from our partner, Daniel, who picked us up. We were the lone survivor of the Carnegie Hall incident. And naturally, I feel... oh, gosh, Wendy. It already happened. Wendy feels some survivor's guilt and confusion about what the heck is going on, why she's having these weird flashbacks to some event in a hospital, and the nightmare the next 5 days truly begins. This game is broken up into 6 days. We've just completed day 1. It all started with this incident, 6 days that were to become a nightmare for all. People will eventually forget and go on with their lives. Not Parasite Eve speedrunners, though. We don't forget. But I'll never forget it. It was pure terror, but... Which day is the longest? Day 5, by far, is the longest day. It was also 6 days filled with familiar memories.
That's actually a trick question. All of the days are equal in length. They are all 24.25 hours, give or take.
I was tricked. right, so day
Sorry,
two.
a quarter. It's like 24 and what, 1/365th or something like that.
Gotta account for the leap. The leap seconds and the leap years. So here's our police department. It is a bit messy. That's okay.
There's
A
also
ragtag
only,
group
like,
of cops.
There's also only like 7 cops at this precinct.
Yeah.
But,
For New York City.
Listen,
Low budget.
Art asset creation is difficult, okay? They don't need to make 400 desks or whatever.
Go through the door, Wendy. Doorknobs can be a little bit tricky in this game. Like, you gotta know where to position yourself for every door because of the pre-rendered backgrounds in this game. It can be a little bit tricky to know where exactly to go. Sometimes you think you would go to the knob, but you don't, and sometimes you need to go to the knob, not the door itself.
So here we're going to the police armory where we see Wayne, who's kind of the second in charge of the armory, kind of a gun freak a little bit, and Torres, who heads up the police armory. We'll find out more about it later, but he's very much an advocate of, like, gun control and stuff, which is honestly a bit odd considering the fact that he's going to hand this street-level cop an M16 here. But he has a lot of reservations about just doling out heavy hardware, which is fair. I'm not going to get into any politics with it or whatever, but it's the dichotomy of this is you have this gun freak in Wayne, and you have this guy that's, like, heavily protective of guns, almost, with Torres, like, keeping them out of the hands of officers unless absolutely needed. So Wayne is also your storage inside of this game, and Plywood's going to dump a variety of keys and his mod permit. Mod permits are used to add special abilities on guns, or special modifiers on guns. We'll kind of get into the weapon customization system here a little bit more as we continue on. But for now, we're going to go ahead and meet Ben. Ben is Daniel, your partner's son. Daniel is a divorced parent, so Ben comes by to drop off some tickets for a showing at the City Zoo, New York City Zoo, I believe. But yep, Daniel's obviously working. Yeah, Central Park, that's what the name of it is. But Daniel's working because there was this catastrophe where people were just lit on fire in Carnegie Hall. But, you know, a small child throws a fit. And we're going to head into Captain Baker, who's going to take us into a media meeting to discuss the incident.
Yeah, get ready for the world's shortest press conference ever. Wendy says, "Sir." And our boss is like, "Listen, don't tell him anything. Just sit there and answer some very basic questions, but don't tell him what you thought happened." And Wendy proceeds to literally tell the press what happened. And then our boss, Baker's just like, "You know what? End of the conference. Everyone can go home. It's Christmas. See you later." And he's all mad. He's going to slam the table. "Damn it, Wendy, I told you not to tell the truth. You're going to stir up a panic." Of course, I mean, if a whole audience of people got lit on fire spontaneously in New York City, I think there probably would already be a panic.
Shoutouts to the slight adjustment in the pre-rendered background to actually pick up the phone receiver, but not actually putting it in Baker's hand.
Yeah, he's just holding an invisible phone.
So we've been asked to kind of pick up on a lead at the Natural History Museum, which is currently having a very interesting exhibit happening, which we'll get into later. But for now, we're going to go over there to meet an expert on the subject of mitochondria that Eve had mentioned to us. That's going to be Dr. Clamp. Dr. Clamp has a very interesting office for a number of reasons. But we're going to make our way there and see what we can kind of discover through him. Pay no attention to the fact that we are driving, like, light is blurring around us and moving at a lower frame rate around us. And we're just doing this on the city streets. Not even with sirens flaring, that's just a clear straightaway, apparently.
Also notice that Daniel teleports. It's very fast when you look at that sign. He's
actually just running while you're looking at the sign.
Running as far away from Wendy as possible. Doesn't get scratched.
Do you have a moment for a quick donation?
Yeah, go ahead.
Shiva donates $5 and says, "See you soon, punk."
Oh boy. Yikes. Some cat-dog rivalry. So yeah, here's the security guard. He opens a gate with his huge flashlight that's larger than our club that we used in day one.
I mean, and you're gonna notice people with, so.
You're gonna notice that I stutter step there. I am pretty much constantly holding circle throughout this entire game. That is the run button. Yes, this is her run speed. So sometimes at the end of dialogue, you want to start moving immediately, and if you mash X while holding circle, you'll start stutter stepping and walking.
A way to get around this would be to enable analog, which actually has some benefit. If you were to use analog for movement, you could save about 10 seconds or so, which is pretty nice, but unfortunately with the fastest versions of the game being through PlayStation Portable and PlayStation TV, getting easy access to analog is not really possible, because this game will not accept both analog and digital inputs. You have to pick one or the other, and if you only have the choice between one, you absolutely want D-pad for just better menuing and more precise movement.
Yeah, because load times are superior on PlayStation Portable and PS TV, it's the version that the top runners use. Typically PSP, just because disk change is just a little bit faster. And that's the version I'm running right here. So Clamp is talking a bunch of scientific stuff about mitochondria with his broken CRT monitor.
Yeah, they give this flickering effect on the CRT, which you're like, oh, well, we're looking at it from a camera, but this isn't supposed to be a camera, this is supposed to be real life. So his monitor is literally just broken. Also, shoutouts to the fact that he's running CS3 Photoshop on that computer. We'll get to see that again later, and you'll get a nicer look at it.
Again, traveling at the speed of light, speed of sound, not sure.
Slight note here, the effect on the rear view mirror is not an easy thing to do on PlayStation hardware.
Yeah, that looks pretty tricky.
So we're told to go ahead and visit the police station again to get further leads on what's going to happen. We are going to then be breadcrumbed over to Central Park, where Daniel's family is actually headed towards that show, so he freaks out and wants us to go there as soon as possible. And he's totally right, because you need to get over there, because bad stuff's about to go down. In the meantime, we're going to receive another mod permit, which again adds the ability to transfer abilities to our gun. We're going to throw that in the garbage at our first available point.
Our boss is going to give it to us, and we're literally just going to drop it right at our feet as we exit. Be like, thanks. So he's going to leave this room and just be like, what the heck, really? I gave you a permit and you just throw it away?
So we're going to have a little bit of a menu here coming up. The purpose of this menu, we are going to be equipping the M16, equipping our new piece of armor, we're also going to be using our bonus points. Talking about bonus points and what they are, bonus points are a thing that you get every time you level up. If you get 100 of them, you can use 100 points to raise a variety of statistics, either on your weapon or in your character. Things for your character include ATB speed, carrying capacity. For the purposes of this speedrun, we are only going to be raising 2 statistics. We are going to be raising ATB, which is our active time battle for the speed at which we can take our turns. And we're also going to be doing improvements to the damage on our weapons. This is important for a number of reasons. The first thing we're going to use is going to be an increase to our damage. That is just to make sure that we hit certain breakpoints to kill enemies in 1 or 2 shots. After that, though, we are going to be going too deep into ATB over the course of the game. Traditionally, back when I heavily ran this game, we were doing pretty much straight damage, and I had always mentioned before that I had wanted to look into ATB and its effect. Unfortunately, I never really got around to it before kind of other people took the ball and started running with it. And it did turn out that up to a certain breakpoint, ATB is actually just more effective for getting through the vast majority of the game. So shoutouts to Primus and Palmer for their work on developing those strategies.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work done into the routing of, the math of this run in terms of what is the most efficient and effective way to get through it on a new game run, because there's only so much experience we're going to be able to get. So huge shout outs to all the people who've helped figure out all the math over the years. I have done none of the math work. I've only really helped with routing with some menuing and movement. So this chest can have 1 or 2 things in it. It gave us ammo. Hope to get the med, but we didn't get the med. It's okay.
So
very good starting ATB too.
Snakes can poison you if they hit you. It's the basic principle of it. You'll notice that at the end of this fight, Plywood is going to be heading towards the top right of the screen. The reason for that is you want to try to end fights close to where you were trying to run to. Otherwise, you're spending extra time running over there. So that's a slight bit of optimization that you might not think of, but saves an enormous amount of time over the course of the run. Another thing that saves an enormous portion of time over the course of the run is you'll notice that the screen kind of like fades in from black. But Aya is typically able to move 1 or 2 steps as that fade in is happening, which is about a second. So in every single screen, if you know what direction to hold, you are saving a second every single screen, which is, again, something that seems extremely subtle, but it's a huge effect when you're talking about going over hundreds of screens.
Yeah, knowing which direction to hold is huge. And we do not want to pick up that junk. Junk is useful if you want to build some of the strongest weapons in the game. If you accumulate enough junk, you can get some pretty beefy weapons, but we're not going to be worrying about that in this run.
Yeah, you are looking at 200 in order to get access to a junk weapon from Wayne. That is just far more than we can possibly get in a normal speedrun in a time-efficient manner. However, if you were to do something like New Game Plus, it would become crucial to pick up those guns.
The random chest, nice. We got the tool. Okay, I don't have enough yet.
So that tool can either be a tool or ammo. The tool is 80% chance, so it's highly in your favor, and that's exactly what we want. We're kind of discussing that some chests can have variants to them. That is kind of a common thing that happens in a large amount of chests inside of this game. Is chests will have a probability to drop 1 of 2 items. And a lot of the times it doesn't really matter for the purposes of our run, but there are things that can be nice and convenient, and other things that could cost a fair amount of time if you don't get it, like that chest. If you did not get a tool there, that could potentially cost you a fair amount of time to find a replacement for it.
It's not quite positioned properly to get the shot off before he hits me, but that's okay.
So, is Plywood going to grab the ammo here, I think?
Yeah.
Okay. So, with the change to moving away from attack damage and more to ATB, ammo can be stretched thin sometimes. And as a result of that, if you wanted to hedge towards safety, there is about 4 or 5 different chests that you can look into picking up just to make sure that you never run out of ammo. Running out of ammo in this game is you're dead for a speed run. And pretty much in the normal game as well. You always have access to your club, but you aren't killing anything with your club late game. Like, unless you're, specifically training towards that and stuff, like a typical player or a typical speedrunner is not going to be equipped to do the late game fights with just a club.
So we use the key we found in that drawer. The bane of everyone's casual playthrough this game is finding that key. But we know where it is, so we quickly go through the zoo and head towards this outdoor performance area where Eve is throwing on a very special performance for all the people gathered.
I mean, nobody seems too perturbed by this.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, floating tentacle lady with a crazy hairdo. Seems fine. I mean, she even got the union lighting workers to light the stage, so good job on Eve getting that coordination going. But everyone is going to turn into goop. You can see the bone. Such a nasty little detail of that leg shot. The goopening. We're going to keep on chasing this little ghost girl. She seems to be leading us where we need to go, so we'll go backstage. I'm going to hold upright and then right when I cross the shadow. And one of the things about movement in this game is sometimes you're not going to be in control of the main character, Wendy, here. So you want to set up your movement in such a way that it minimizes the amount of turning and movement that happens when you're not in control, and running upright to that shadow like that minimizes that. Save some time.
To that end, sometimes it's also important to realize how a trigger or a zoning place is fitted. So let me kind of explain that more. So it could be that you could run a diagonal, which might be the fastest way to get to a specific place that you want to go. Like, let's say I want to hit a door. Maybe taking an angle is the fastest way to get to that door. But what if there is a trigger that is midway through the room that is just a straight line across? In that case, I don't want to take that angle because I'm moving more distance instead of just running straight. So there are some times where you need to understand if a trigger is actually the object you're running towards, or if it's just this straight line that you need to cross.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty important when trying to engage in battles as quickly as possible. Most battles in this game are required, but we'll get into the random battles a little bit later, because they do exist.
A little bit of a interesting fight here with the appropriate damage on your weapon. It is possible at this point forward to crit and kill crows in a single shot. So you can potentially gamble and gain a lot of time on this encounter. This is tempered somewhat by the fact that since the crows move in and out of combat so quickly, it can sometimes be difficult to get clean shots on them. But with the frog skip that we had, though, that makes it so that the damage that you deal is not going to be sufficient at this point to be able to one-shot them. Unless you got the offense 2 on day 1, I believe.
Yeah, and unfortunately we only got the 1-in-1.
So once again, going to try to menu out the junk here. Plywood's probably going to take a moment to use his Parasite energy to heal as well, just to get topped off for the next fight. I guess we can kind of discuss a little bit about Parasite energy, which is this game's magic system. Did you want to cover that, Plywood?
I'm going to focus on this fight because
Okay.
I sometimes struggle with this.
So, Parasite energy is a bar that's underneath your health bar and your ATB. The way it works is it slowly fills over the time of combat itself. It will fill up slower as a fight goes on, so you can't just use your magic to attrition out battles. Anytime you use a Parasite power or magic or whatever you want to call it, it uses a certain amount of that gauge. So you can use this inside of combat, or you can use it out of combat. The important thing to note about this is the only way to recover Parasite energy is in combat, though. So if you do spend your Parasite energy to heal, that is a deficit on your gauge that you will not be able to get back until you start fighting again. This will become more important later on when we get access to more powerful abilities that require us to pool Parasite energy in order to use them. So the basic premise is budget this Parasite energy appropriately. It is going to regenerate, but you do have limitations on when you can get it back. It was a rough hit to take on the ape from the long-range attack, but we have a lot of Parasite energy to play with, so we'll be able to heal up a little bit here.
Yeah, and at this point in the game, energy management really isn't terribly important. But as Turbo Dog said, as we get more abilities, it'll become more important for certain battles. It really does depend on the battles coming up, what the game plan is, and of course, a huge component of how the battles go is your active bar. If you start with a low bar, a high bar, or a medium bar, you don't have control over that. So that bridge fight I had, I started with a high bar, which is really nice. This fight I started with a high bar. It means I can immediately get damage out, take out an enemy. Makes things a lot safer. Sometimes you don't really have that luxury, and you're going to get into a fight where you have low bar, and then typically the enemies are going to get an attack before you can. Oops.
So there's going to be a little bit of prep work for the next battle. The chest that Plywood had checked before has a chance to be a tool that can save time later. Unfortunately, we got a defense boost which can still be used later on. So Plywood is actually going to fill his weapon to an even number of bullets before going into the next fight. If he gets good ATB, he might go for a quick kill on this boss. I'll cover the clip and its relevance afterward. So the worms boss starts with 4 small worms. As you kill worms, they get larger and reposition themselves. Unfortunately, the ATB was a bit slow there, so we're going to get only a single shot on the far right worm. Plywood's going to have to adjust his timing a little bit in order to be safe while he shoots the remainders of these. This is a very scheduled fight, if you were. You need to be able to hit certain enemies at certain times to be able to kill them off in sequence. If you don't, it's very easy for the pattern to kind of get out of sync, and that's when things actually start going poorly inside of this fight. As you deal damage to enemies, enemies will kind of reposition themselves, so it's important to know which enemies you've hit, which ones you haven't, and for how much. This becomes particularly important as we get to the last part of this particular fight. You'll notice that the damage starts increasing as more and more worms start dying. So Plywood's getting some pretty poor luck on these spread shots. He might elect to start pause buffering to verify where these splits are happening and dodge a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, I'm taking a lot more damage than I'd like. It's okay, really. All it's going to do is cause this fight to take a little bit longer, but it's better to take it easy, because if we take too much damage, we might be in a bit of a pickle for the next boss.
Okay, so with just the 2 enemies, it's dangerous in the amount of damage he's taking from each individual hit, but it's a little bit more controlled now in how he can approach this particular fight. Very important that he plans his shots out so that he shoots kind of early on when the worms emerge, because if he waits too late, the worms can go underground and negate his shots. Crits are very, very fickle things in this fight. If you crit one of these last 2 worms too much, you might kill them far too early. The ideal thing to do is to try and kill both worms at the same time here, so you never get the largest spawn. That is not always something that can happen just due to your crits that occur, or potential misses that happen. If the worms do a melee attack that they can do, it does significant damage and causes them to dive into the ground much, much faster than if they shoot their spread shot. So that's another thing that can be very, very detrimental. We saw that Plywood had to get a reload there, which is not great, but we can kind of cover what happened there and why that occurs. Well, obviously you can tell that a reload occurs when you run out of bullets inside of a gun, but we actually have some tech to get rid of that. So Plywood should be cleaning up this fight relatively soon. Took a fair amount of damage, but you know, the important thing is to keep your cool and just try to hedge your bets on safety where you can in this fight. As I mentioned, days 1 and 2 are not extremely hard until you actually start heavily optimizing it, and this is a perfect example of it. This fight is extremely dangerous when you try to do a speed run of it, but if you grind it out and you kind of attrition out the boss and play safe like Plywood's doing, you can pretty consistently get out of it as long as you don't get chains of bad crits.
Yeah, that fight I would say is one of the most tricky in the game, especially if you're trying to optimize it. There is a strat called the 121 Worms, which uses an odd number of bullets and the reload animation to its advantage. It's the fastest fight, but demands a really good execution and excellent management of your attack pattern. Because depending on which worm you attack first, it's going to affect the other ones.
It also requires that you don't get meleeed by any of the worms.
Yeah. There's a lot of factors in that fight. It's interesting, but it's also kind of daunting at the same time. So this is Eve 3. We're fighting in a very small carriage, which can make things a little bit tricky. I'm going to immediately attack as she flies down. I want her to try to smack me, but miss. She has 2 different attacks here. I'm going to let her fly up. And then we just stand in the opposite corner of wherever that explosion happens.
As long as you have over 100 HP, you're relatively safe to kind of tank hits against Eve. And getting the slap means that she stays down, so you can still shoot her. If she goes up to create her energy blast, then you can't engage her until she comes back down.
The nice thing about this fight, though, is that you're very likely to take or give critical damage to Eve. We were kind of alluding to it earlier, but distance affects your damage. So if an enemy is on the edge of your range, you're more likely to get these like glancing blows, low damage hits. If they're outside of the circle, you're gonna miss. But if an enemy's right next to you, you're more likely to take a critical shot. So that's kind of the risk-reward of positioning.
Yeah, so if they're very close, you have a higher chance to crit. If they're inside the sphere, you can just kind of hit them. If they're anywhere outside of the sphere, you either get a massive decrease to your damage or a miss. So at the very least, you always want them in your sphere.
Oh, so that the weak blows are outside sphere? That was just like they're on the edge of the circle.
Oh no, they're considered outside in that case.
I see.
So we find out that Ben actually left the performance before the thing started going down, so he survived. Lorraine, Daniel's ex, kind of a blob now. But we'll
part of the big goop blob. The goopening of New York. So we have a few minutes of cutscenes as day 2 ends.
If the host, basically what's happening is they're ordering a full-scale evacuation of New York, and we're going to get to kind of see that. If the host would like to kind of discuss what tactical fundraising action is all about, and what your money has been going towards, be kind of a cool thing.
Certainly. TFA2 is porting our community member Pythonicus in his move and also in his trip to hosting for SGDQ this year. We're still going to be open for donations for the next 2 hours from the looks of the timer. So if you guys would like to donate towards that, we greatly appreciate it.
All right, so what
Thank you all for your support. Really appreciate it.
So we're going to be going ahead and leaving Ben at the precinct, and he's going to make friends with one of the police dogs here, Shiva. You might not want to get too attached to Shiva, but she is dog. So I know you haven't caught everything, obviously, Plywood, but have there been any other runs as part of the marathon that you think people should check out kind of after the marathon goes through?
Oh, it's a good question. I would say the races were a lot of fun. MGS1, MGS2, and Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes. I got to commentate for the Metal Gear Solid 2 and Twin Snakes race, and I always find those games a lot of fun to commentate for. I actually had a couple of PBs and records during this marathon, including for Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops Plus. So congrats to Pythonicus for getting that in his own namesake marathon. That's pretty nice when that happens, right? It's like you have it on your name and you get it too.
So we are meeting Maeda here. Gosh, I forget his first name. It's like Mitsuru Maeda or something. Anyway, Maeda is a scientist from Japan who at least has studied the original Parasite Eve incident that is talked about inside of the books and in the movie. He's journeyed here since he's heard of the appearance of mitochondrial Eve, or Eve, and events are kind of lining up with some of the things that were occurring inside of Japan as part of that incident. So he's come here to try to assist and find out what he can about the incident. Funny enough, he is the person that had spoken to Baker before on the phone, but Baker kind of brushed him off, as it were. Now he's trying to more actively investigate what's been happening around here. Soho has been quarantined off, but the police officers that were keeping Maeda out combusted into flame, so that's all good. Wendy has been brought to this apartment to kind of recover from her fight, and there's just a fire barrel in the middle of this room, and just seizure-inducing cartoons on the TV screen.
I always imagined that he was literally just watching white noise and finding it fascinating.
So you're going to have Maeda walk in the frozen time, right?
So how do you do that? I know you were mentioning that before. Do you just when he...
So as Maeda starts walking here, Plywood's just going to let him walk and not progress the text. And it's kind of a funny look into game design. So like once he starts walking towards the door...
as they're exiting?
As he's walking towards it.
Okay.
So, kind of talking about game design a little bit, you kind of expect the player to read at a certain rate or maybe complete things on a certain time frame. So sometimes you don't exactly plan out kind of exactly how to approach if the player doesn't do that. So this is kind of a fun thing that not a ton of people know about because most people just read and progress the text boxes.
So you want me to mash as fast as possible or as slow as possible? I've never actually noticed this trick.
So whenever he actually starts walking towards the door, just don't press anything, like now.
Okay.
So hopefully that wasn't the text box you needed to clear, but
I think that was.
Oh, unfortunate. So if you
So
keep
he
that
would
text
just
box up,
just stand at the door and just keep on walking in it.
yeah, he just like walks towards the door infinitely because the game just Daniel hasn't told him to leave yet, basically. So the game's like, wait, what? So he just keeps on that line until you progress the text boxes. But maybe you guys can catch that on your casual runs or whatever. So basic principle here, Wendy is just kind of doubting herself, like, oh, perhaps I was the parasite Eve monster all the time, and they're like, no, you're stupid. Sleep in this crack house or whatever it is, with a 30 ammo case inside of it for some reason. There's no gun in this room, just 30 bullets. It's very odd.
Yeah, the events leading up to her ending up in this room are a little bit unknown. Because she gets knocked out in that carriage and then just kind of ends up in there.
I believe the justification is that Daniel finds her and takes her over here. The bigger question is how Maeda finds her, but
yes,
yeah, I don't know.
So yeah, this is Soho, day 3. Movement here is a little bit tricky, and we also have a menu to do. Once we get to the gun shop.
So Soho is kind of an interesting portion of the game. We're going to have 2 places we have to hit. We have to hit the pharmacy and the gun store. The gun store, we are actually going to be picking up our next primary weapon, which is going to be a machine gun. There are many different types of weapons inside of Parasite Eve. There's pistols, there's machine guns, grenade launchers, shotguns, etc. The only 3 weapons that we use in the game are pistols, submachine guns, and the rifle. The only rifle that we use is the M16 that we currently have, and we only use 2 handguns, one at the beginning of the game and one at the end. The submachine guns are what we're going to be using the vast majority of the game, and there's a few reasons for that. Primarily, submachine guns have enormous clip sizes, they shoot very, very fast, and they reload very fast. At the very, very core, weapons kind of operate the same. You know, a weapon of equal damage will do equal damage compared to another one. But the rate at which a gun shoots and the rate at which you reload a gun are considerably different. There are considerations like rifles tend to have more range, machine guns tend to have less range but bigger clips, things like that, but those are somewhat irrelevant. What we really care about is the speed at which we shoot and the speed at which we reload. There is another attribute, like a special modifier on submachine guns called random, that is going to be extremely beneficial later. We're going to talk about that a little bit more as we get into the police station so you can see what that really does. But for now, we're going to hit in the pharmacy. Are we going to pick up anything extra? Maybe
I'm
some
going to pick
extra
up
medicine?
a revive. So I have 2 revives.
Are you going to grab the medicine 3 maybe?
No.
Or are you gonna okay.
Just the revive.
Alright, so talking about Revive, what Revive does is it's automatically used when you reach 0 HP. It'll bring you up to a minimum amount of HP with no ATB. It's nice for giving yourself a second chance, but it is not always a lifesaver, because sometimes, depending on how quick the ATB is for the boss or what the situation is, sometimes you'll just resurrect and immediately die again. So it's important for getting a second chance if things go poorly, but it's not something you want to rely on.
And yeah, for this game, the hardest strat you can go for would probably be the fastest strat on worms, and that's not even like a consistent thing. You have to be in the situation to even do that with the active bar. There's some tricky movement in this game in terms of like hitting certain triggers, but I mean, that's really just comes from experience and practice.
Don't listen to them. The hardest strat in this game is apathy from day 2 and day 3 mashing through these sequences. Like, this is kind of the more frustrating thing with starting this game, is day 2 and 3 just have these extremely long talking sequences, and the probability of getting out of day 2 at a high end is already so low, kind of like you are resetting pretty aggressively on it, that can be really frustrating to mash through all of day 2 and then lose it to a poor Worms fight or anything like that. So we're now at Clamp's office, which we are going to learn that for some reason in this Natural History Museum, this guy has a tabletop electron microscope level technology on his desk. And you might go, no, that's just a normal microscope. Look at this. This is not... This is all cellular, and then it starts going into the atomic level.
It's pretty impressive.
And this is just on a desk. And Clamp complains that he's not getting enough funding. Like... to kind of talk about this is Maeda taking a blood sample of himself and introducing kind of some of the goop from the Eve incidents and seeing what it does. And it seems to line up from what he had read about from the original mitochondrial Eve incident in Japan. So seeing this, Wendy here is going to ask Maeda to test her blood, and when he does, they discover that her blood has some sort of resistance and can kind of evolves in such a way and adapts in such a way that the parasites don't change her or don't take control of her cells.
Yeah, she has the anti-goop property. Anti-combustion to flames on her cells. Because she has a connection to these events that goes far beyond just a random twist of fate. But this is just a mashing sequence. There's not a whole lot to do here, and this is definitely I think this is like one of the longest mashing sequences in the game, if not the...
Oh yeah, well, Parasite Eve is a fantastic game. I will fully concede that day 2 and 3 make for a very slow start for the game. Personally, if you were to ask me, I think Parasite Eve is the best aged PlayStation RPG. I didn't say it was the best PlayStation RPG, but I think it is the best aged. Just plays on a very nice curve. There's no real grinding.
It's pretty quick, like even casually.
Yeah, and the length is kind of perfect, I think. It is not uncommon to spend maybe 15 to 20 hours on not only the game itself, but even the New Game Plus content.
What about the sequels? I haven't played the sequels. Have you played the sequels?
Parasite Eve 2 is good, but not as good as the first, I feel. It has some control hiccups that make it kind of cumbersome. I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this, but I think Third Birthday is fine. Its biggest issue is that the PlayStation Portable didn't have dual analog sticks, which hurts the game considerably. A lot of people bemoan the changing of characters and the story changes inside of it, but I mean, to me, gameplay is king. I'll be real with you, video game stories are by and large extremely terrible, or just plain terrible, when you look at them any more than a surface level. So the gameplay is much more important to me. And Third Birthday's fine. It's not good, it's not bad. And a lot of people who say that it's terrible have never actually picked up the game. Like, true fact. They've never picked up the game. They probably haven't even watched an hour of gameplay. So...
Oh, nice. I got
monitor
skip.
Yeah.
Did.
So that's kind of funny. Normally, Clamp is supposed to go in and turn off his computer. We have no idea what causes that not to happen, but it saves about a second if you skip over it.
Get out of here. Daniel gets all mad because he saw his ex-wife's name on a list on Clamp's computer.
Yeah, Clamp seems to be gathering
The llama skip.
Genetic information about some of the inhabitants of New York and comparing them against something on his Photoshop spreadsheet.
Clamp skip occurs. I hope not. Alright, we are heading back to the police station. After Daniel saw the list. We can go reconvene with our fellow officers.
But Eve has already made her move.
She assaulted the precinct. And now this place looks even more scrappy than before.
Much better than a pepper. I'll show myself out.
That joke was lost on me. So yeah, Maida is about to give us a charm.
Yeah.
And this charm is a good luck charm, which we will promptly put away in a box, never to see again.
So the good luck charms are kind of an odd thing. Very mysterious things that people have constantly been looking at. Like if there's something, there's nothing with them. You just throw them in the box. They're meant to just take up slots. With the exception of the last one he gives you, which the last one he gives you is meant to be kind of a placeholder. Talking a little bit about game design here, placeholders, sometimes you will give a character an item just to make sure that they will have space for another item later on. Talk about that again in a moment. For now, we are seeing that Torres has been attacked and wounded and killed by a monster that attacked the precinct. This is where we learned that his daughter was killed in a gun accident, and that's why he's kind of got this viewpoint. Wayne's like, "You get that son of a bitch," and sends us out.
Yep, nail that monster for Torres. But we're not going to do that at all.
We're then going to have to hit a couple of triggers in order to progress the plot. Basically, right now we're kind of looking for Ben, who's already running around the police station, to handle something, which we're going to see later. What was I discussing? Just completely lost my train of thought as we were walking into that room.
Placeholders.
Ah, yes, placeholders. So a good example of that would be like in Resident Evil 1. At the very end of Resident Evil 1, this is not a spoiler, there's a battery. You have to turn on a elevator using the battery that's right next to you. When you put the battery in, it triggers a cutscene that takes you up an elevator. So that battery is meant to be like, we want the player to have one open slot, because if they don't have one open slot, they will not be able to complete the game. So they force you to pick up the battery. Once you use the battery, it locks you into the next area. So there's no way you can kind of enter that area normally without having that slot open. So that's an example of a placeholder.
So we talked to Warner. He's telling us what's going on. He tells us to go help Ben and the captain. And right here, we have the possibility of coming into another battle. It's a 50-50 coin toss. When you defeat an enemy on a screen, it has a 100% chance of happening. But when you return to that screen, it's a 50-50 chance of it occurring again. And we're going to want a number of random battles throughout the game, but we'd prefer not to get any here in the police station. We actually avoided both. The one downstairs and the one here. So that's actually really good.
Yeah, so typically if it's a forced battle, like you're absolutely sure you're going to get it. As Plywood said, you have to fight it the first time. The next time it's a 50-50 shot. There are other screens where it is just a chance that you'll get an encounter. So those are like what I like to call like kind of the pure random encounters, like the ones you really, really want to avoid. That being said, we picked up a chemical vest, CM vest, as I mentioned. The strength of the chemical vest is in the auto heal it has. So they have an ability that when you hit 20% or lower of your maximum HP, you will automatically use the highest available medicine in your inventory. This can be very useful for healing yourself and keeping yourself healthy, and providing safety against boss fights and other dangerous encounters. It keeps you from having to spend a turn to heal, basically, or spend time out of combat healing. This can allow you to kind of tank certain bosses and tank certain attacks that you normally couldn't, or would be very dangerous to do so. Also, chemical vests tend to have a high parasite energy defense, so like energy attacks tend to do less damage to you, which is pretty nice. So we're coming into a fight with spiders. Spiders can shoot webbing, which causes stiffness. Stiffness reduces the speed at which you get your ATB by a huge amount. Here we're also going to really get to see what random does. So at the base level, what random, the weapon modifier, does is it will randomly select targets to shoot. And it selects them all at once. So if the game decides between enemy A and enemy B to shoot enemy A all 3 times, if you kill it in one, that's it. So like any bullets that were assigned to a monster after it's dead are wasted. So that can be kind of frustrating to deal with if an enemy only has 1 shot to kill it, but it dumped all the shots into it. So you might go, why would anyone decide to put random on their gun if it makes it more difficult to be able to target enemies? Well,
Reasonable question.
We'll discuss that in a moment, as Shiva is currently having a really bad day. Baker, the head of police, deciding to not just shoot the dog before this happens, or possibly send it out the window near him. Also decides to corner himself with Ben.
Yeah, that was the thing
running
I was going to
out of
mention.
the
He
door.
literally like brought himself into a corner.
I know a lot of people have been like, oh, he only has 6 bullets, but I mean, he's the police chief, man. He's got a revolver. What do you want from him? He might have even shot some things on the way here.
That's true.
So if Plywood took a fair amount of damage, he could hit this side door in order to get a full heal. That shouldn't be too much of an issue. It looks like he's pretty decent on health. He does need to be careful when finishing this encounter. This encounter drops a tool. He wants to have that tool available, so he wants to make sure that actually hits his inventory. Funny enough, you do have inventory space in this game. If it fills up too much, you can't pink things up, so it's important to manage that. Another thing of note is that the dog enemies here, the dogmen, have an ability which lowers your defense that can be particularly problematic in combination with crits. So let's talk about the upside of random. So this is going to get kind of mechanically intensive. In this game, guns have the ability to shoot multiple shots. If you shoot 1 shot a turn, it does 100% of the damage on a gun. If you shoot 2 shots, each shot will not do 100% damage. Instead, the damage will be split up among the bullets. But, depending on how many shots you have, it can do more damage. So 1 shot is 100%. 2 shots each do 60% each, so it does 120% overall.
Diminishing returns.
Correct, a
on the
proration
bullets.
on damage. So at 3, it's like 126, I believe, and after that, you're kind of wasting ammo and sitting still for far too long. So what random does, and a very powerful thing of it, is that it skips over the proration. So random will shoot 1.5 times the bullets. In this case, this machine gun shoots twice, but with random, it will shoot a 3rd time for a 50% increase. This thing ignores the proration, so instead of shooting 3 times and doing 126% damage, like a normal 3-time shot, it'll do 180. So it'll take that normal 60% and continue to do it. This is the Shiva fight. The difficult thing about this is you're fighting in such a small area. The AoE that it does there will always remove half of your HP. It has a beam that's rather difficult to dodge. Its bite attack can do substantial damage, and again, because of the small space, can be hard to dodge. Ooh, nice dodge there. And it can heal.
That was a spooky fight.
So we actually got pretty good there. I think you only got 2 heals, which is pretty good. Each heal basically takes away a turn that you've done. The rough thing about that fight also is since you have a random on, it will choose heads randomly, which can be difficult to kind of focus fire and get rid of heads as soon as possible. So let's go ahead and break this down very, very quickly. So once again for random, just to touch on it again, random will shoot your gun 1.5 times the amount, and it does more damage per shot than it should at that ammo amount. That's the shorter of it.
Yep. Better damage, and a nice little thing, practically speaking, is since you don't have to choose your targets and you don't have to choose your bullet, because like with the pistol and the rifle, we had to choose which targets to aim at, and then we had to mash through all the bullets. Random, you just press the button and go, which is nice. Makes things a little bit easier, practically speaking.
Yeah, so in addition to the extra damage that you're dealing, ideally, if all the bullets hit, as Plywood mentioned, if you're able to hit all the targets in your attack sphere, you don't have to select targets, just a little bit less menuing. This becomes way more important when you're talking about New Game Plus runs, where you're really shaving off as much time as you possibly can.
So yeah, thankfully the Shiva fight went off without too much trouble. That is definitely a run killer boss, especially if you don't have any revives, because the chemical vest heal doesn't always activate when you want it to activate, and the thing is that it's not going to activate to heal you if the enemy in question outright kills you with its attack. So that was the reason I was running into Shiva, to try to activate the self-heal, the auto-heal function. But it got a little bit scary there, since I had to dodge an attack that would kill me, that lunge attack, which is not something you want to get hit by. That attack can do a lot of damage, potentially, from Shiva.
Yeah, as mentioned, you want to try to understand how much damage a boss can do to you at any given time, so that you don't put yourself in danger of dying in that single attack. And yeah, sometimes the solution is body bumping. Contact damage by and large is less than the damage an attack will do in this game. So sometimes you just need that little bit of extra damage. So now we are going to head to the hospital to try and get more information about a procedure that Melissa, the actress that turned into Mitochondrial Eve, had there.
Yeah, there's something very special about this hospital, as we will soon see. All those
So, it also
flashbacks
goes in line... Yeah, sorry.
come back. Oh, it's fine.
It also is in line with the idea that Mitochondrial Eve in the original movie was searching for something specific, which this hospital has, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll notice that it's Christmas right now, so there's Christmas trees everywhere inside of the hospital. I'm pointing that out for a reason. But just keep that in the back of your mind.
Primus acknowledging my frame-saving movement that Palmer is yet to learn because he's a fraud. Just kidding.
Then he immediately screws up the
the movement of the
session
door.
hall menu. Yeah.
You have a moment for a quick donation?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have $5 from Daily May, who says, "Here you go, Python. Hope you find a good home very soon. It's not much, but it's the least I can do. Much love, Daily."
Oh, thanks, Daily.
So why didn't you take the other elevator there?
If you try to press that button, the door at the bottom still opens, so it's better to open the door or use the button closest to the door rather than going across to apparently use a button that just brings down the one that's on the opposite wall. Good elevator design.
So everything that's happening in the hospital basement is just kind of fetching keys and fuses to restore power that's just gone out so that we can use the elevators to get back up to the hospital levels. That's just the basic premise of this. Kind of talking about random chests here. There is a chest in here that originally, when this game was being routed out by people like me and Dreambomb and Pooexel, was basically a death knell if you didn't get the right contents. So inside of this chest, there is the potential for 2 types of machine guns, the MP5 and the Micro Uzi. Originally, if you got the MP5, it was a flat-out reset. No questions asked. You got the wrong gun. We needed the Micro Uzi. Over time, strategies were developed that made it so that you still are probably resetting at the highest level of speedrunning if you don't get the MP5, but it's possible to complete runs at this point with it. So that was a pretty nice thing to have happen. The other alternative you used to have is if you made a save here, you could try again. It cost you about 50 seconds or so on each try. But it's a 50-50 shot, so it was to the point where between the tool chest in day 2 in Central Park and this, your probability of just on those 2 chests alone was 40% to complete a run. That was irrelevant of how well you performed, what patterns you got, just did the chest destroy you or not. So it's pretty nice that strats have kind of formulated around avoiding that as much as possible.
Yeah, and the gap between the guns are pretty small. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like Turbo said, like, unless you're playing at a very high level and, you know, you're looking to get as much possible, it's not going to kill your run by not getting the proper weapon out of that chest coming up. Now, very important here that
Sorry, I misspoke. The M10 is the gun, not the MP5. MP5 is a different weapon later on,
which we will be picking up. Very important that I have enough room here to pick up the stuff in this room. And by room here, I mean in my inventory, because I don't want to go through an animation and then it just tell me your inventory's full, and then you have to throw the thing out, then do the animation all over again. It's a real hassle. So on this burnt body is a key card we need. The blue key card, I believe. Yep. Blue card key. Okay. Not blue key card. Blue card key. And hopefully we get to avoid this random battle, and we did. I've actually avoided all random battles, which is potentially nice. We'll see. We do want a certain number of random battles. So we can hit a certain level mark.
Ones as well. Like, you want to pick up the ones that give you the most experience with the least investment of time. You know, just basic optimizations of stuff. Right now, we're going to be going up to, when I ran a game, a section I called the Gauntlet, which is a series of 3 different random encounters that can occur. That's going to be coming up in about 5 minutes or so, after a cutscene on the first floor. So there is the potential to catch up on experience there as well. Picking up the Micro Uzi is nice here. As mentioned, it's the machine gun of choice going into the late part of the game. It'll allow us to use certain strategies that we normally couldn't do with the M10. The reason for that is that the M10 has 1 less special ability slot. I mentioned that mod permits could be used to add special ability slots. The Micro Uzi has 1 more than the M10, so we can use that to great effect. This is a mixed man. Mixed men are one of the more frustrating enemies inside of the game. They have a ball on the front of them. that ball can be released, it creates a secondary target that the player must fight, which is problematic when you have random on. You could spend a lot of time shooting the cancerous ball attacks rather than the actual enemy that's making them, which is kind of crummy. In addition to that, they have an AoE stiffness that you pretty much can't dodge, and that'll slow down fights considerably. So we're actually merged with Energy Shot coming up here. Do you want to kind of talk about Energy Shot a little bit and its impact on the run due to us using random?
Yeah, so Energy Shot is kind of like it's both a failsafe and a very good option in certain situations. So the Energy Shot, I don't think it even takes a bullet. I'm not sure. It might actually take a bullet. But it's basically a Parasite Eve infused bullet. And it uses all of your energy that you have currently. So the more energy it does take a bullet, okay. The more energy you have, the more damage it does. And this can be useful for certain encounters, like the Mixed Man, just to do good damage to the Mixed Man, hopefully get lucky and do one more shot and finish him off. But because of this Energy Shot being best at full energy, it means our management of energy is becoming ever more important for certain encounters coming up.
So another couple of really key things about it. When you do shoot Energy Shot, it'll deplete all of your Parasite energy, as we mentioned, but that'll also stun Aya momentarily. So you can't just use it flippantly, you kind of have to be tactful with your usage of it. But the big advantage of it is that it does this huge amount of damage that can hit anywhere on the screen, and it will guaranteed hit. No questions asked. So when we have random on our gun, we can't choose our targets, but we still have a range that we can shoot in, which can be problematic. So by using Energy Shot in certain areas, like with the Mixed Man, we can say, I am hitting that Mixed Man. That guy's dead. And it doesn't matter how far away he is or what's happening, it will guaranteed hit for a lot of damage, which will be very useful for Mixed Men. Later on, we'll be seeing it with potentially bats in the sewer as well to counteract their blindness attack.
Now, aside from the damage from getting attacked, one thing you really got to be careful about, since we want to keep on pumping damage as quickly as possible, is getting stun locked and therefore delaying our next chance to use an attack. Sometimes when you get attacked, it'll just be one hit, and then you'll do your attack since you already used your turn. But sometimes if you really get chained up, it'll take a while for you to do your turn. Meanwhile, your ATB is at full and you're just wasting time, because we want to keep on using our ATB whenever possible, unless certain circumstances call for it where we want to hold our ATB. But typically we don't want to hold our ATB.
So during this flashback that Aya's having, it's Christmas, and she has flashbacks to the basement, despite the fact that when she visited the hospital, we'll find out later, it was like not even remotely close to Christmas. So a little bit of a continuity error there. Like, they didn't want to remake the pre-rendered background, I guess, for the hospital without the Christmas lights or tree. Alright, so we skipped over the first fight in the gauntlet. Are we going to hit 2 or 3? 2 is kind of the one we want, because it has a lot of experience on only a couple of things to kill. Okay, we did not get that.
Alright, we got the lobby. This is the first random fight we've had.
Okay, this is actually the worst one to get, just because it's a large area and a lot of targets for random. We're being very polite, though.
And just grouping together.
So, I was gonna say his HP is getting a little bit low, but the chemical vest did proc, which is good. Had it not, there is a outside chance that the next enemy could have one-shot him, but we got away with it. So, speaking about what Eve might be doing here, we find out that this hospital has a sperm bank, and according to what happened in the original story, Mitochondrial Eve is trying to conceive the ultimate being.
Ultimate.
And you know what you need to conceive? You need sperm.
Where do you get that sperm? The bank. But first, big slime. Now this big slime can actually drop a vest, which I do not want to pick up. It's not useful whatsoever. It's just junk in my inventory. It dropped. Yep, just any regular bank. Roll up to your local bank. Ask for sperm.
Might have to go in the alleyway, though.
Yeah.
So we're turning off the liquid nitrogen used to cool the sperm banks here. But it's too late. You guys already found a sample to use.
See what I mean with this opposite button nonsense? Except this time, if you go to the bottom, it opens the top. At the start, you do the top, it goes to the bottom.
Can you go to the Chrysler building real quick? Also, the window, just so we can show that off. So if you guys are wondering what New Game Plus content is, okay.
There's a window with the Chrysler building?
If you were to go down there in the hallway in the screen, there's a window that shows the Chrysler building and gives you a shot of it. If you guys are interested, the New Game Plus Super Dungeon that enables the true ending of this game is climbing the Chrysler building, which for a number of reasons we do not do in the speedrun. Yeah, but if you're at all interested in this game and want to know what New Game Plus content looks like, you get to carry over your weapon, you get a bunch of bonus points at the end of each day, and you can climb the Chrysler building.
So we got pretty lucky that fight. I used my energy shot to hit the mixed man, and then my next random shot hit the mixed man, so we got no brain balls. It was very good. PE 100% is the future of this game. Yikes.
Reminder to never say 100% in the prospect of an RPG.
I'm getting ganged up here in this weird dog kennel area with cages.
Listen, man, you didn't even go into the side room. Okay? You didn't walk over this vertex. How can you call it 100%?
You didn't pick up all the junk.
Alright,
so here's the sperm bank itself.
So even though we would love to be able to use energy shot on this mixed man, we can't really. We need to save our parasite energy to potentially use abilities early on against the boss fight that's coming up. I didn't catch it. Did you actually pick up haste?
I
don't get enough experience for it.
I don't
there
think
it is.
so.
Okay, you just got it, I think.
Yeah, I did. Okay.
Okay, so picking up haste there is something that is extremely helpful for the next boss fight. Haste is very, very powerful. It's lost a lot of the impact that it used to have since we prioritize ATB now, but it's still useful in certain encounters. Crummy thing here, we have to pick up this junk in order to progress the plot. Doesn't matter which one of these piles you look at first, you will always pick up the junk first before you pick up the elevator key. Inside of these files, we discover that Aya's mother and sister had an accident, Wendy's sister was an organ donor, and her organs went to a variety of people. And one of those people was Melissa, who inherited her...
Cornea, I think.
No, no.
Or is it?
From
Or is
Melissa.
that? No.
Melissa
Okay.
got... It's either her kidney or her liver. I don't remember which one. Sorry. And so that's part of the reason why Melissa was taking so much medication, was because of the organ transplant. But what happens is these organs actually carry basically mitochondrial Eve with them. So since she got that transplant, mitochondrial Eve basically took over her body and started to control Melissa, the actress at the beginning of the game. But what happened to the rest of the organ donors, or the organ tissue, you might say? It's a good question. We'll find out at least what happened to one part of it. But we'll hold off on that.
So this is the big mama spider. We saw the little baby spiders. Now we're gonna fight the mama spider. Use haste.
So haste is pretty impactful here, as it allows us to close the distance a little bit quicker. We didn't see it here, but if you don't close distance with the spider quickly enough, it creates a large amount of webs. Those webs cause stiffness and basically lock you in place, and it makes the fight considerably more dangerous and reduces your damage output to the spider quite a bit as well. You'll see that Plywood is going to take a fair amount of damage here whenever the spider decides to melee, but that's actually okay. Typically the damage is not high enough that it's going to cause a lot of danger, considering how much medicine we've been picking up.
Yeah, this is one of the easiest boss fights in the game. There's not a whole lot to worry about. I mean, look, I just... it's over. Compared to Shiva, this fight is an absolute breeze.
Yeah, there is... So the big consideration also sometimes with fights isn't if they'll kill you. Sometimes it's the fight after it. What I mean by that is there are certain fights in this game that aren't typically going to kill you with CM Vest on, but CM Vest might use up all your medicine tanking hits. And that means that the next fight you get into is super dangerous because you don't have that healing to fall back on. And sometimes you don't have the Parasite energy to heal yourself manually. So you're kind of left at this health deficit going into next fights.
Shiva went about as well as it could have, I would say. I got some nice dodges.
2 heals. That's all you need to know, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit of a beginner's trap here. I'm pretty sure everybody died to this and another section of the game at least once. But that fighter jet that we actually saw is crashing into this building. So we need to find an escape, and luckily there's this painters or cleaners scaffolding here that we can get on. If you do not get on that, you will die. Game over. You lose.
Yeah, and the jet will still be flying towards you as you have your menu open. The only way to stop it is if you pause. Okay, so this is the last fight of this day. It's this one little spider.
So noteworthy, we didn't actually kill the giant spider. We just fell into the hospital. And as we learned from Parasite Eve 2, these monsters don't just disappear after the game is concluded. So I guess that hospital just has a giant spider in it.
Spider Hospital, New York City, 1997.
Been working on its doctorate. It's PhD.
Yeah. Gonna become a nurse practitioner. Start a spider school. Spider medical school. So that's gonna be the end of day 4. We just have to move in the police department for a hot minute.
A little bit of optimization on the city screen when you do travel from place to place on the overworld map. You can move the cursor before the game visually loads. Same idea as when you're moving before the screen loads on each individual screen.
So now we're on the hunt for Eve, since she is apparently pregnant from that sperm bank, and we're all to split up. Day 5 actually allows us to go to two new locations, and we'll actually be visiting both the warehouse and Chinatown. But we won't be in the warehouse for long. We're just there to pick up some stuff that we need for our micro Uzi.
So this is why you should never trust Primus. He says that the spider's just hanging around the 13th floor. That's actually incorrect, because if you recall, we entered a second elevator, which moved up a considerable distance. So, obviously you should
Checkmate.
lore shame people, when they do RPG speedruns.
Alright, so go over to here, warehouse. So this is like an optional area where there's a crab boss at the end. Spoilers, there's a crab boss that's guarding a weapon. We're not going to go in the warehouse, though.
So I
We're
know
just
we
gonna
discussed
stay
it
outside.
previously, but just to make sure, we aren't going to be picking up CM Protector, right?
That's correct. I'm not picking up
Okay.
Secret Protector.
So there are 2 items that we are going to pick up. We're going to pick up a pistol here and a tool. If you're a beginner to this route, or if you wanted a ton of marathon safety, there is another armor you could pick up inside the first section of the warehouse. But for now, we're just going to pick up these weapon and this tool. The weapon is going to give us a ability we can put on our weapon. The weapon is going to have a modifier on it. We are going to take that modifier and put it on our micro Uzi. That is going to allow us to gain full ATB at the beginning of fights sometimes.
Yep, crab battle. That crab battle is also no joke. It's pretty tough, actually.
Nothing's a
know
joke
how
about
to-
this section, Plywood. Because when you put your hand into a pile of goo that used to be your ex-wife's face, you'll know what it's like. Forget it, Plywood. It's Chinatown.
Chinatown. So yeah, we got some enemies here, and we hope to get the quick draw ability that we just put on our micro Uzi, and that allows us to attack immediately, which is pretty nice. We hope to get that as much as possible as we go through day 5.
For those of you wondering, no, I don't have any jokes of my own. Everything that I do is just a Simpsons reference.
Again, I'm gonna show off some hot movement setup. Gonna walk along that snow. Oh yeah, 30 frames. No, it's like a 12 frame save or something.
Yeah,
I
that
don't
is
even
one
know.
of the more bizarre ones that I was talking about. When I talked about triggers, even if you run straight at that manhole, Aya just moves up and left and then cuts back. It's super bizarre. So speaking about other things that have changed inside of the route, traditionally we used to go and get a shotgun inside of the sewers. The power of shotguns is a modifier on them that gives us a spread shot on our gun. That spread shot overrides random, but you can hit multiple targets with it, and you can choose your targets again. What happens, though, is just because of the typical makeup of encounters up to this point, and the ability to do more damage through proration, random tends to save you more time than the extra time it would take to do extra battles to get spread, and just the amount of battles where it would actually have an impact. So that was another thing that was kind of explored more in more recent history. I hesitate to call it new stuff. So these are bats. Plywood just got completely destroyed by them in this fight. You'll notice they have ultrasonic waves, kind of putting them on blast here, but this happens sometimes. Those ultrasonic blasts, if they hit Windy, she will become blinded. Blind reduces your attack radius to basically nothing. It's almost not worth attacking at all. You might as well just either heal darkness or blindness, or use energy shot to bypass it. It's a very frustrating status effect, and sometimes there's just not much you can do to avoid it.
Yeah, and this isn't always a bat fight right here. Oh, come on. Sometimes it's a frog. I don't even understand the angle there, but thankfully it worked out. Sewers are really bad. Blindness is by far the worst status effect you can get from an enemy.
Sewers is also problematic because a lot of the fights are multi-target, so random becomes a huge problem. For an example of that, back when I was running, I achieved a high 307 on like PlayStation 2 hardware at the time. Dreambomb, who is another prominent runner of yore, got a 307.01, I believe, which has been lost to time, kind of. The only difference between our runs was pretty much I got a significantly worse sewer than he did. Like, other than that, they were pretty close to identical.
Yeah, sewers can really pendulum swing your pace, because didn't mention it, but we actually skipped a completely random battle, and it's arguably one of the worst fights you can get into. It's 2 snakes and 2 bats, and poison and blindness are not great to have, and that fight can take a while, so luckily we got past that fight. But that first fight in the sewer, where you don't have any cure Ds to remove the blindness, is really a chore.
Yeah, so this is an example of a fight where it's kind of like there's not much you can do about it. If he gets his ATB early, you just kind of have to take it. If you decided to energy shot here, you'd be setting yourself up for less parasite energy going into another boss fight. And again, the boss fights are far more crucial to have good resources coming into. That being said, Plywood took a substantial amount of damage here, so depending on what his medicine count looks like or how he feels about his medicine, he might have to invest some parasite energy into healing here.
Yeah, I might just do like a heal 1, and that shouldn't break the bank, since there is one more fight to go through, and should be okay. It depends on how the next fight goes. This situation's a little bit scary, though.
Yeah, we are quickly coming into the hardest boss in the game for a normal new game run, both casually and in the speed run. I feel like this is another boss where if it doesn't kill you, it can put you in such a precarious resource position that you could die to the next encounter, which is in itself pretty dangerous. So we'll be picking up the medicine here. We will also be picking up a chest inside of the sewer pump control room. That's going to be a little bit of ammo. That's going to be the last ammo that we really need for the rest of the game. Like, the probability that we run out of ammo after that is basically non-existent.
Yeah, and I am going to save when we get to the subway, just because this is not the best situation health-wise.
So funny enough, I originally had thought that there was some sort of trick to this room. There isn't. You have to turn on both pumps. There's no question about it.
The goop is just getting bigger and bigger.
Big goops for big boys. So,
Very important, we only do 1 tap there for that panel, so we don't accidentally try to turn it back on when it's already on.
Shout outs to, I think it was B. Marie, I want to say, that it was either Beamery or Bounding Gray. I don't remember which one that found out like kind of a slight optimization with this section. They kind of stumbled upon it that it was better to go up the left tunnels in the subway. There's a medicine and an enemy that you can get some parasite energy off of. But something that I do apologize that I forget which of them kind of first thought about it, but yeah, sorry. Back to what I was going to say. So plywood. You know what? I'm going to hold off on that. I'm going to ask you in the near future to kind of discuss your thoughts on optimizing movement in this style of games, given your background with kind of survival horror and other games. But for right now, I understand that this is going to be a very harrying experience with the next boss. So we're just gonna table that for now.
Yeah, we'll table that until we're in an actually safer situation.
So because of how dangerous this fight is, I am actually going to shut up. But I'll give you the basic premise. Centipede is very dangerous. He hits hard, he hits fast, he can potentially poison you, he can potentially blind you. If he does either of those early on, you need to get rid of them as soon as possible. Midway through the fight, he splits into 4 pieces. The goal is going to be to use Energy Shot to get one of these as soon as possible and create a safe zone to stand in. After that, it's very much just hoping that your random works out and you kill pieces as soon as possible and kind of out DPS the boss before he kills you in that phase. So let's hope for the best. Like I said, I'm going to stay quiet because this is a rough fight.
Okay, good. We want to avoid that poison. We're just going to do damage. Try to avoid getting attacked because I really don't have the HP to spare. Good. It's unfortunate. Good crits. Stand in the corner to avoid these attacks from the far ones. Oh, so good. Very nice on those crits. And the shots are just lining up perfectly. Okay. What a great fight, given the circumstances. Yeah, getting all those random shots to land on the same body is, like, the ideal. So even though I got poisoned when I did, it didn't actually end up mattering. This is really nice. But sometimes that fight doesn't go that well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fight that, like, it's a game of inches. And again, because of the strategy we use now with random, like, you are completely at the game's mercy. If the game decides to shoot randomly at things not in range of the body sections, then you're in trouble. And it doesn't take much. Another poor thing that can happen is if a poison rain happens early in the fight and does cause poison, you have to get rid of it because it'll just do too much work over the course of a fight.
Again, I think I'm, like, forgetting some tool somewhere along the line, probably in hospital. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and just pick up the side one here.
Okay, there we go. So we're picking up this tool in here. I need to bring in the ice bullets, the micro Uzi. It's gotta be one in the hospital. That is okay though, because
I think it's the one near the G3A3.
Yeah, that's I think the one I forgot.
Anyway, so Plywood had to take a short detour there into the train car to get an extra tool. That's to shift over the ice attribute from his bullets.
Yeah,
big
that's
robot.
the one, Primus. That's the one I forgot.
So, ice bullets is another thing that's again, not a new development, but a more recent development. A lot of the enemies inside of the museum in this part of the day are weak against ice rounds. So adding that attribute onto the gun is a damage increase against the majority of enemies that we're going to fight inside of the museum. Museum has a lot of random encounters as well, so gets a lot of mileage out of that. So there is a slight skip that happens here. So you are intended to follow... It's Clamp. Come on, it's Clamp. You're intended to follow Clamp off to the left there, and then you get ambushed by dinosaurs, and then the random encounters spawn. Because we avoid that, we actually skip random encounters that can occur in this room. And avoid all the encounters that happen on the way to meeting him and discovering that a door is locked. So this is the other dangerous thing. So because you can be very, very deficit on medicine going into this fight due to centipede, this fight is pretty dangerous. Scorpions have a poison they can do, but that's not the most dangerous thing. They have a claw attack that does a fair amount of damage, but they have a sting. The sting has an enormous damage range. I have seen it do 37 damage. I have seen it do 153 damage. So you can just get completely blown out by it. Another extremely dangerous thing about it is that the Scorpion can counterattack with the sting sometimes after you shoot it. If you do this at a certain time, the Scorpion can potentially sting you twice in a row without you being able to dodge either of them. This is relatively rare, but it can happen. So you're talking about potentially getting 60 to 300 damage dealt to you instantly. Again, that's not something that you can really plan for as a speedrunner. The only thing that you can do is try to avoid attacks as you can and keep your health relatively high to avoid maybe the high end of one crit attack.
Yeah, the real trouble comes in that, like, at this point, you are likely not to have a whole lot of meds between the sewer, the centipede fight. Now that we're in the museum proper, we're going to be getting a lot of med drops potentially from enemies, but before we actually get into this part of the museum, our med count is typically going to be fairly low, so that means the CM vest really isn't going to save you on top of the huge damage the Scorpion can output. Now, typically, that's not going to happen in my experience, but it can. And even if you feel confident, things can get pretty dangerous pretty quickly in really any battle in this game.
So funny thing about these armadillos, we are able to manipulate their position. Their attack that they deal primarily is a rolling attack. Once they start the rolling attack, they will always go in that direction. It tries to target you at the start of it. So because of that, we can stand in such a way that all of the pill bugs or armadillos or whatever you want to call them, all of them roll in one direction. So that makes it so that our random becomes a lot more consistent, a lot more reliable against them. So we're going to revisit what I was discussing before. So coming from a survival horror background like you do in addition to Metal Gear games, can you kind of talk about the importance of clean movement in these games and how much that really impacts the run at large?
Yeah, you know, with a RPG like this, you know, there's only so many elements you can control for, because encounters can be varied. but the one thing you can control for in your overall play is your movement. So, and that includes your menus, because, I mean, in a sense, menuing is a form of movement. That sounds kind of weird, but, I mean, you're moving through the menu. You're doing the proper inputs at the right time. Now, just full disclosure, I'm not saying that my menuing and movement have been completely 100% on point during this run, but when I came to this game, one of the things I wanted to look into was what can we do movement-wise to save a little bit of time here and there, because it's pretty key. I mean, if you have a bunch of time where, dead time of cutscenes and dialogue, there's only so much time you really have control over 100%. So, and survival horror games, since they're pretty basic in terms of their overall gameplay, it's mostly just get from point A to point B. Knowing how to do that efficiently, as with any speedrun, is pretty important, but typically those games aren't going to have a whole lot of tricks. Like, this game doesn't really have a ton of tricks. It's mostly about knowing how to adjust in certain situations and
knowing where to go is only going to get you so far. It's kind of how you get there that's the real meat and potatoes of this thing.
Yeah, and the gameplay and combat in this game is really fun because of the variability. You have to know how to adjust given certain situations, given that you always want to end up where you want to go at the end of a fight, and you can't completely control always the enemy behavior. It makes fights exciting, I would say, and I think is the primary appeal of this game to me. Also, it's really not that hard of a run to get into, as myself being kind of an RPG noob on the whole. I don't run a lot of RPGs, but this game is actually pretty friendly, and through the efforts of a lot of people in the community have made this game pretty gosh darn approachable, I would say. And this is, I think it's fair to say it's been like a multi-year project from many different people. I kind of came in at the end and looked at some movement stuff, but I didn't do any of the math efficiency that Primus and Palmer and others have done.
Yeah, I would say at the very base level, let me actually pull up my notes so I can properly credit this. Probably should have had these up to begin with, but
You've been doing pretty well without notes, I gotta say that much. But for everyone watching, I am actually using a cheat sheet of notes developed primarily by Primus, but with help from others, including myself, specifically for like menus and stuff, just so I remember what I need.
So, as you'll have to forgive me, I don't know everybody who's done every contribution for this game, but just to throw out some names there, a lot of the first strats of this game were primarily adaptations of Puexel's segmented SDA route, which itself was kind of an adaptation of NFQ's tasks of the game. After that point, Dreambomb kind of took the ball and started running with it a little bit, changing up the strats a little bit, particularly when it came to like machine gun usage and such, adapting tools, making it really RTA viable. I will say that my contributions themselves have been rather limited. Like, I've kind of mentioned things that weren't looked into as heavily, but my own contributions are rather limited. But after that, I mean, most of the modern stuff that has come out has been a conglomeration of efforts, mainly of Primus, Palmer. A couple of the most recent findings have been through the LCC, who's a fantastic RPG speedrunner of a variety of games. He's kind of picked up on the frog skip in day one, and a strategy that we're going to be picking up the weapon for pretty soon, which is the MP5DW in the security room. But definitely Primus and Palmer have really been the major contributors to the route in its current incarnation.
For sure. And LCC also, Metal Gear Speedrunner, runs Metal Gear Ghost Babel, one of my favorite games in the series, and
Go Bagel.
the Ghost Bagels. I have to find one more frame saver, and then LCC is gonna run the game. So I gotta find some frame saver in TFA2.
Okay, here's your frame saver. You ready for it? Don't get hit.
Ready. Don't get hit. See,
Okay,
that's gonna
we did
require
it,
me to
boys.
actually be good.
We did it.
That's the problem.
So this is an example. The pill bug, for example, Plywood could have ran to the far end of the hall there and baited the pill bug into rolling towards him. Saved a tiny bit of time on movement, but it's fine. This encounter's kind of a weird one. Yeah, he got the two big dudes encounter. So something that we didn't touch on, you'll notice that Plywood has like over 500 HP. At the start of Disc 2, you get a major boost to your HP on the next level up you get. That's to help deal with the encounters that you're going to be meeting later on in the game.
Hope you guys like this ice sound, by the way.
As you can see, we don't really use a lot of Parasite energy powers in particular. Mostly just heal, a little bit of haste these days. And later on, we'll be using or energy shot sometimes sparingly, and later on we'll be using an ability called Liberate, which is kind of the goal of the museum, is to get enough experience to get leveled up for Liberate. But we'll discuss Liberate a little bit more later on. For right now, that's the MP5DW. That's a weapon that has one use in the premise of the speedrun, but it's a pretty nice use. Plywood's going to hit this secret elevator to go to the 4th floor to storage, where he's going to pick up a shotgun and a tool. I mentioned that shotguns have the ability to give a spread shot to weapons. That'll be useful for modifying our final major gun of the run. You're going to be surprised what we get this gun from, too. Maybe you won't. Maybe you've actually just played this game a bunch. But just pretend you are. The illusion is what's important.
Exactly. Wendy is surprised. But yeah, the museum is...
Wouldn't you be surprised?
I would be.
I mean,
I would
Eve's crazy.
Eve is crazy. Of all things, she is crazy!
Sorry. She's crazy!
She's crazy!
Because the she's is in normal, and then...
No, it's the other way around, Primus. We're gonna dialogue shame you. You don't remember the typography of this line.
Yeah, RPG speedruns are kind of an oddity in that you can actually discuss like minor plot points of the story and stuff. It's not something that you get in more action-oriented games that often. Like, I remember one of the early CDQs, I believe it was Mike Uyama and another person were running Altered Beasts, and they had, like, a dramatic reading of the story and plot that, like, didn't even make it out of, like, level 2 before they were done with the game.
It's always a weird gamble with random, whether you want to just hold off until you can get all your enemies nearby, or you just say, you know what, it's fine. I'll just hope I hit the right enemy. And especially with the movement of the armadillo pill bug thing, trying to manage that along with whatever enemy is along for the ride. can be a little bit tricky.
So we're coming up on about maybe 40, 50 minutes left inside of the run. Something I will mention, I'm going to do a light faux pas here, but I will mention that since this is the last run of Tactical Fundraising Action 2.0, that after this run, maybe you guys want to consider taking a look at RPG Limit Break, which is a long-standing RPG speedrunning event that is going to be occurring this week. Might want to check that out if you're at all interested in additional RPG speedruns, like Parasite Eve.
That's right. RPG speedruns are pretty dang cool. I'm looking to learn another one in the near future. Saga Frontier. Oh, I need room. I'll just get rid of that. We actually saw the dialogue where she's like, I'll pick it up later. And he's like, nah, you need it.
So because so many things are dropping actually inside the museum, it's important to kind of deal with your inventory. I was just about to mention it before that happened.
Yeah,
but
it's
Plywood
okay.
might actually invest a little bit of time here to use some Medicine 2s up. Medicine 2s are quickly losing value for us, and we want to try to replace them with Medicine 3s or 4s.
So here's Clamp. He wants to have a friendly conversation with his scalpel, and then Daniel shows up from the corner and karate chops him.
He emerged from Daniel space.
The Daniel space. It's a hammer space, but only for Daniels.
Monitor's still broken.
Still working on that project, though.
Still changing his
Photoshop.
layers.
So Clamp basically reveals that he's been in leagues with Mitochondrial Eve, and he thinks humanity's doomed, so might as well advance the evolution of mitochondria over humanity. And basically says, set me on fire, lady. They jump out the window, and he's
man.
lit.
So you ready for the new lore? The new lore is that Clamp was working on his mitochondrial OC that he was going to post on like DeviantArt.
He's gonna write some hot fanfic. Literally hot. I don't need that. I don't need that. Yeah, that's the only thing about having revised in your inventory is that the 2 slots, especially later on, can be kind of crowding. But again, it's safety precaution. I didn't get that refight. I'm a little bit concerned about my experience, but we'll see how it turns out. Might just work out enough. Didn't hit the pterodactyl. Yeah, this whole area of the museum really tests your ability to handle encounters, and various encounters, because the enemy composition is not static. Okay. It's all because of Frog Skip. I'm gonna heal up right now. Nope, I'm not doing that.
So I will mention on the premise of the importance of movement as well. Movement is so important that in the notes that I had provided for people, I even mentioned the D-pad directions that people should hold going from screen to screen.
Yep.
Just to kind of idiot-proof myself, in case I forgot. So this is the Triceratops. It's kind of a mid-boss of the museum. Main things to deal with here is the Triceratops will kind of lumber from wall to wall. Whenever he hits a wall, he can charge. The charge will take him all the way across the room. From that position, he might choose to even charge again, up to 3 times is the max I've seen. The other attack it has available is an energy shot, which you can kind of stand at the side of the head or shoulder to try and avoid. The main thing here is you want to try to get rid of the head. There's a few ways that you can do that. A lot of people just shoot. Energy shot is also somewhat of a viable option, just to remove the head. Another property of energy shot is it ignores defense, which is pretty nice for getting rid of the head here, just pushing it into the next phase of the fight. In the next phase of the fight, the enemy can only do this energy shot or just run around rather than lumber around. But in general, not really a particularly dangerous fight, but one that can drain your resources depending on how poorly the luck for the charges goes. On the upside, though, you do get a full heal after this fight, which is kind of nice.
The only thing is like, you gotta be very careful about those charges, because they can do a substantial amount of damage. For instance, during that fight, I took a 200 damage charge, which is like nearly half of my total HP.
Alright, so now we're going to be fighting the T-Rex. T-Rex has a few noteworthy attacks. Its bite has a ridiculous hitbox that makes no sense and lingers much longer than the actual animation for the bite. It has a flame breath that can be difficult to dodge. It has eruptions of energy, and it can jump around the room. So those are its primary attack forms that it does. It's not particularly hard to dodge any particular thing, but if you get caught in a bad situation, you can lose some medicines or some health pretty quickly.
So we're going to immediately haste and try to avoid this flame attack by staying on his rear.
If you're wondering what haste does, haste improves the speed at which your ATB fills. It also improves your actual running speed, which, since we prioritize ATB over the course of the run, the improvement to ATB speed is a lot less impactful than it used to be in the round.
I can imagine if you didn't level ATB, it'd be super important to use.
So, this is kind of a lengthy fight, but at the end of it, we are going to be picking up our final weapon for the game, which is going to be the M8000. The M8000 is a handgun that has the double action ability on it. What that allows us to do is do 2 things when we get our turn. Like right now, he can only shoot with his gun, or cast a spell, or use an item. With the double action, we can do any of those 2 actions. We can attack twice, we can cast 2 spells, we can attack and cast a spell, any combination of those. Super powerful ability, but they only give you access to it at the late game because of that. We are going to be breaking our gun, and talking about tuning, we mentioned that you can move modifiers onto weapons, like special abilities. You can actually move bonus stats from gun to gun as well, and that's basically what we're going to be doing here, is we are going to be moving the bonus stats from our micro Uzi over to the M8000, and then we're going to be giving it the spread shot from the shotgun as well. The reason we do this is the M8000 is still a handgun, so it's still a pretty good gun. It has that 2 action mod on it. It has pretty good base stats, and in addition to that, we don't want to keep the frost round attribute on our gun. If we did, then we'd be doing less damage to the final bosses of the game. So something that I had mentioned way earlier back in day 2 that I didn't really touch back on was the idea of your clip size. You notice that you can reload in combat. You can also reload your clips outside of combat, and an interesting property of reloading is that if your gun ever has 0 bullets in clip and your turn ends, it will reload without the animation. So let's say you have 2 bullets in a clip and you shoot twice and that's it, the gun will reload itself automatically up to 2 bullets. So that's a slight bit of optimization that can keep you safe in fights, so you don't have a reload animation, and it can save you time, taking time to reload outside of combat.
Yeah, and playing along with that, you might have noticed that sometimes I would have 0 ammo in my gun. And you just automatically reload when you get into the next fight, so that's why sometimes I would just not reload when I'm at 0 or take myself down to 0 rather than to the max. This is going to be our last normal enemy counter in the game.
Yeah, functionally reloading to 0 or full is the same thing.
And this should give us level 33. Yep. And we perfectly got our XP, which is nice.
So we picked up Liberate, which is your final ability that you pick up inside of the game. We'll get to see what it does later on, but it requires your full gauge in order to use. It's very powerful. After you use it, just like Energy Shot, you become stunned. So it's very important to make a good decision when to use it as well, or else you will become vulnerable.
Yeah, Liberate is essentially the ultimate ability. Is there any Parasite energy abilities after Liberate?
No.
Yeah. And the way the XP works, just by the game design, that you should usually be able to get to 33 before you enter this room. If not, there is an extra fight that we can force if our XP doesn't work out, but our XP actually worked out perfectly, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's basically impossible to miss it if you're playing this game casually.
Yeah.
And that's one of the really nice things about this run, is the fact that there's no real grinding in it, and it's not like, oh, well, you don't have to grind. It's that we don't have to grind, but also the game is still giving us everything we need. You know, there's still danger in the run, but it's not like a super low-level run like you might see in some RPGs, or a run where you have to grind to be powerful enough like others. That's, again, one of the reasons why I think it's aged really well. It's just you can kind of play through the game normally and still have plenty of power to do whatever you need. The only caveat to that is just making sure you don't screw up your gun. Screwing up your gun is one of the ways that you can put yourself at a huge disadvantage.
Yep, or just wasting a lot of ammo and then ending up in a situation where you have to smack things to death. Not so good. But besides that, it's kind of beginner friendly in certain ways, especially for the speedrun. I personally would recommend this run to people who want to like kind of dip their toes into an RPG speedrun. I felt like it was pretty friendly for me. There's definitely some issues with this game, but I think you'd find some RPG runs, maybe even most, I don't know if I'm qualified enough to say that, but some definitely have a lot more restrictions on what you need in order to complete the game. Whereas this game, it's pretty loose and you can pick up a lot of extra stuff. I mean, there was stuff during this run in particular that I didn't pick up that I could have picked up to make it even safer. So we're learning about Wendy's past here. And this is where the cornea comes in, right?
Correct.
This is where the cornea transplant happened.
So basically it's discovered that in addition to the... Again, I forget if it's the liver or the kidney that was brought into Melissa.
I believe it's a
cornea
kidney.
Transplant. Yeah, there's a cornea transplant from Maya, your sister, onto Wendy. And that's the reason she gets all these powers and is immune to the effects of mitochondrial Eve. And why she's able to manifest parasite energy herself.
So the twin Navy guys salute. They get some sweet shots, some sweet CG shots at these carriers. Naturally, the U.S. military is here, given that Manhattan had to be evacuated. U.S. government is kind of interested in making sure that they don't have to like nuke Manhattan against the threat. If they can help it.
You say that, but then they use a nuclear weapon to attack monster.
Are those nuclear missiles?
I want to say it is. It's a small-scale nuclear warhead. I could be wrong on, but I believe that is actually mentioned in this scene. Not this scene, but you know, when they
One
get
of
to
them.
the fight proper.
Explains why Aya runs so slow. That is one of the issues with this game, is definitely the run speed when you're moving around in the overworld. I can kind of get why the speed is a certain... Well, the run speed is a certain speed when you're in battle as a way to balance things out, but yeah, Aya moves
Wendy.
quite slow.
Wendy moves quite slow.
Wendy just
It's all
casually walks towards enemies.
Primus instructed me for you guys to pay attention to this soldier's run animation in the foreground. It's
That's
very
smart.
well animated.
No filler, just run slowly.
So something that's kind of interesting about this game, something that you see inside of the Resident Evil games as well, and the Final Fantasies of this era, this emphasis on pre-rendered backgrounds. This has a lot of advantages, actually. By doing a pre-rendered background, you can make them look really nice. They kind of look a lot better than 3D environments. When you look back at many full 3D PS1 games, they look pretty poor. What this allows you to do is have a really nice background and save your polygon budget for your characters. So you get these nice expressive models that look pretty nice.
Yeah, they were trying to push the models, and the models themselves look good. The only thing that looks kind of weird sometimes is the faces in this game. They have that FF8 look going on.
Have you seen the cosplay of the guy who he took the squall face
Yeah.
for the coronation ceremony? So for those of you that don't know, there's a ceremony.
You're the
like,
prettiest looking guy here.
Yeah. There's a part in FF8 where there's like this dance ball celebration ceremony, and the main character's face is just a jumbled mess of pixels because it's PlayStation. What do you want? And one of the characters goes, "For her, you're the most attractive guy in this room." But it's just this jumble of pixels. So some guy actually cosplayed and like printed out a mask that just had that same pixelation for his face. It's pretty good. Look at this Congo line of death that they're making.
They're protecting Wendy's chopper, which is flying on autopilot, so we can launch a missile on Liberty Island. Not Ellis Island, Liberty Island. They're two different islands.
Nerf Gunblade's pretty powerful too. I recently saw that. So we gotta take out these huge Godzuki.
It's the goop monster. Right in the face.
This is the real Ghostbusters 3.
Granted, I feel like if you blew up goop, couldn't it just kind of like, coalesce again into goop again? I don't know how to deal with goop.
Okay, so
You know what I mean?
The thing about that is mitochondria.
Mitochondria, exactly. Statue of Liberty falls, but we saved the day. Or so you thought. Mitochondria is definitely the powerhouse of the cell.
Well, you killed Daniel's ex-wife.
I killed a lot of people right there in their goop form. And
So you'll notice
Eve
something.
emerges from the goop because she was like part of the goop. Now she's...
Notice
don't think
something
about it too much.
specific about that also. She's not pregnant anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So where did ultimate being go?
I'm sure it's not important. I quite like this scene. Especially with the music kicking in.
So apparently where we drop in boys is Liberty Island.
So here's Eve. She's like, so it was you, which it's like, are you surprised? Like, who else would it be? The only person who can not combust into flames when I'm near you. And she's got some organs going on.
She's got a serious case of the Japanese.
So we're gonna chat for a minute. She's still disappointed that we're siding with humanity.
So this fight is actually... it's easy but dangerous, if that makes sense. This version of Eve has a variety of abilities that are very damaging, and depending on which ones you get, could hurt you quite a bit. Because of this, positioning in this fight is very crucial. We never want to go behind Eve. If we go behind Eve, we trigger one of her most difficult to dodge attacks that does a lot of damage. But we never really want to be particularly close to Eve either, because if we are too close, she can do a variety of melee attacks, one of which is a grab. One of those grabs it basically just kills you. Like, it hits you for enough damage that you are guaranteed to have to use healing to heal yourself up. It will never actually kill you, but it can bring you down to 1 health.
Nice. I'm just going close with that spray attack. And trying to avoid that grab right there. Don't want that.
It's because of how dangerous the melee portion of this fight is. You do need to be respectful of Eve's ATB. And that's kind of what happens if you don't respect it.
Yep. Just a demonstration for everyone watching at home.
So this is where the spread shot actually comes into its own really heavily, by the way. You'll notice that this Eve had 3 sections to hit. Spread shot allowed Plywood to hit all 3 sections at once, which is really nice. So now we're going to see a different form of Eve, and in my headcanon at least, this is actually Eve's form of Liberate.
Yeah, that's kind of how I view it as well.
It shares a lot of design elements with your version of Liberate. And you might say, what do you mean, your version of Liberate? Well, you are liberating your mitochondrial power with the parasite energy power of Liberate. So what does Aya's Liberate look like? Well, we'll get to see that in just a moment.
Oh boy. Please don't fly away. Thank you. Yeah, this part of the fight can be very dangerous if you don't have Liberate, but we're gonna lay down the smackdown. Here comes the pain. 256 over and over again. This is a lot of damage, and even though it's a long animation, it's very safe while we're doing it, since Eve just kind of has to sit and take it. And even though we do get stunned, since we lose all of our energy from using Liberate, she's gone, so she can't really do much. Yeah, kind of like Knights of the Round, but not quite as long.
So there are some caveats to Liberate as well. So Liberate does use your full bar and stuns you afterwards. It does have infinite range though, which is nice, so you can use it regardless of where the enemy is. One of the main problems that we will see coming into the next time we use it is that it randomly chooses targets, which can be a real problem in the next fight that we're going to use it.
Yep. She is turned into goo. From goo to goo. And here we are with day 6. Which only can mean that this is happening... Actually, it's kind of weird, because, like, at the end of this day, you're going to see the sunrise, so I guess day 5 kind of bleeds into day 6 a little bit. I'm not too sure.
Plywood, midnight is day 6.
Yeah, but then, like, the sun rises, so what?
Right.
Has she
So
been sitting on the...
from midnight to 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whatever.
Oh, okay. All right. It's a lot longer than it is right here, but, you know, I'm fine with that. D. That is a game. But this is Parasite Eve, not D or D2. So our buddy Wayne's gonna ask if we want want to be able to name our guns. We're going to refuse. Wendy don't need that. And just for safety, we're gonna go over to the serviceman who's gonna give us some medicine and some ammo. Oops, I don't want med 3. Yep, med 4. And this is just to make sure that we have no problems whatsoever going into the credit sequence. You know, because obviously there's not much left to do besides sit back and watch the credits roll.
So for those of you that want to know, you name the gun and armor that you want to take into New Game Plus.
Yeah, but we don't need that. I ain't even gonna save.
This is New Game Plus, right? This is the New Game to True Ending run.
Yep, there you go. What Palmer's done. I think only Palmer's done. If you want to see some crazy ways of running this game, Palmer has done... I think he's done Club Percent. I know he's at least done Blindfold and True Ending. And lo and behold, the ultimate being is born. And it screams and causes a shockwave that just explodes aircraft carriers. Pretty impressive.
Baby rage, basically.
Yep. And we're just like, you gotta be kidding. I thought I was done.
Time to shoot a baby.
This pilot's like, we must evacuate, and Wendy's like, no, I must stay behind. I'm the only one who can do this. It's my job.
So you guys might be saying, what does Parasite Eve have to do with Metal Gear speedruns? Well, right at this time, right at this moment, Liquid and Solid are fighting on top of Metal Gear, bare-chested. That's happening at Shadow Moses. You just don't know yet. Yeah, the timelines don't line up at all, but that's what we're going with.
Well, Snake and Liquid do fight on top of a boat in MGS4. Well, not really Liquid, kind of Liquid.
Let's not get into that.
Let's not get into it. Let's get into Ultimate Being. So there's multiple faces to the Ultimate Being. We're going to open with a shot and some haste.
This fight's particularly easy for this form. It has a pulse attack, which does about 150 damage. It has a huge explosion that's the more dangerous attack. Depending on how good your ATB is and how quickly the enemy decides to attack, sometimes you can avoid it, sometimes you can't.
Okay, good.
Okay, so we avoided getting the explosion attack, so that saves medicine. So now we're going into phase 2. Phase 2 has 2 phases to it. There is the combined form, and then after you do sufficient damage, the wings will break away from the body. The body is the thing that you need to kill in order to progress to the next phase of the fight. And this is where we're going to use Liberate, and this is where the problem occurs, is if the game decides to focus on the wings with the Liberate attack, then you're going to lose a lot of damage. That was a bad hit. So that's an example of CM Vest not saving you. I mean, he hit him for way more than 20% of his HP, and now he's getting really reamed by some damage there.
Yeah, this is not how this is supposed to go, but that's okay. Because dying there means our energy is gone, and now I have to actually fight, which I really don't want to do. Bit unlucky, but that's okay. So here we want Liberate to attack the body, not the wings.
Yeah, it's pretty much guaranteed to kill now. Plywood has put out quite a bit more damage on the body than you would normally see. So, yeah, you got 2 hits. That's got to be enough.
Yeah. But even so, we don't really want this constant switching just because of that animation that plays regardless of going back and forth. So yeah, that didn't go as well as it could have, but that's okay. That's what the revives are for, in case something like that does happen.
Side note, you might want to check your medicine count when you get a chance. Just so you know what you're playing with.
I think I probably have about...
Because you ate a lot of them
4 or
during that
5. I'll check on first turn.
So typically you never want to actually spend time checking your medicine amounts, but just because of the nature of what happened in that fight, okay, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
Just because of the nature of what happened in that fight and having to do marathon safety, important to realize just how kind of loose Plywood can play here. You dodge that attack by getting under Ultimate Beam, the corner attack. Melee attacks can be dodged, but sometimes it can be difficult depending on your positioning. This is really just one of those fights where you avoid this huge AoE attack and then just try to output damage as best you can.
You want to hit the shadow of the ultimate being. I'm gonna...
You might want to medicine before you liberate.
Too late.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe we could test if the equip trick works. Like, maybe you remember, like, try using a medicine before equipping the gun. Like, maybe that'll work. Anyway, so the MP5DW, we mentioned a gun that we picked up inside the museum. There is a strategy for this next phase. This next phase, we are going to do minimal damage to the boss. The important thing that we need to do is shoot him as much as possible. And the MP5DW shoots a lot on a single turn. So even though the damage is going to be low, it's always going to do 1 damage. So the rate of fire is the thing we're really counting on here.
Yeah, you can get lucky and finish off in 1 full clip, but I'm going to be safe and use a full cure and then equip the MP5 if I can. Oh, I don't think you can.
Okay,
no, you
so yeah.
Okay.
Back out of it and then... Okay.
I'll just
so
shoot once. Wait. Oh, that's a full... Oops. That's not what... That's the other kind of cure. The other kind of cure. I'm sure I'll be fine. Yeah.
So that was little bit of exploration. I do apologize about that. I had brainstormed with Blywood on a previous thing that maybe you could use one action from the M8000 to heal and then switch to the gun, but I guess you can't do that.
I guess you have to switch your weapon, and it takes a full turn regardless.
So at this point, Maeda mentions that he's created some bullets that contain IS cells that can break down mitochondrial creatures. He tried to give us to this multiple times, but was dragged away. So now Daniel gets to get lit on fire and then get salt water in his burn wounds because of that. But at least now we have the bullets.
Luckily, we automatically switched to Maeda's gun, which conveniently fires mitochondrial bullets.
Again, in my head canon, I think of these more like tranquilizer darts, and Maeda's gun is actually more like a tranquilizer gun. That's why it does so little damage.
Okay, that was a little scary, but we got through it. It's the important part. Typically, this boss isn't going to throw a lot of nonsense at you, but it can happen.
So we're going to have a few minutes before time, but just thought I'd inform that we're going to be finishing up the run here fairly soon. But first, a chase sequence. We need to run away from the ultimate being. And if we ever get hit by the ultimate being, game over. So very important that we don't mess up our movement here. Because if you ever make a mistake inside of this and you die, this is another place. I mentioned on the rooftop, it's pretty common that people die their first time. This is another place where people often die. Because unless you know where to go, there are 2 rooms where there's a split in the path. So you only have a 25% chance to just guess the right way. And then you still have to know that there's a control panel that you have to activate. That being said, the control panel is pretty clearly marked or indicated, but it is something to keep in mind. So it's not uncommon for beginner players to die a couple times to this and have to do that whole fight all over again.
And you can't use that phone, by the way. Don't try to use that phone. It doesn't work, and you'll die.
Excuse me, I used that phone in my RPG Limit Break run.
For real?
Yeah.
Oh, you can get out?
Yeah.
Oh. I always heard that like you would just straight up die if you use the phone. I guess it's just very tight, huh?
Go ahead and you can go ahead and catch the end of that run. See what happens.
Oh, okay. See, I opened it now.
Yeah.
Just gonna hold.
Primus mentioning part of the aftermath of that.
So like you accidentally ran into the phone?
Oh no, there was no...
Oh, it was totally intentional?
Yep. Listen, sometimes making a joke is far more important
than anything else. And time is coming up when it fades to black. Time. 2:46:38. You know, that is not too bad given some of the struggle with that final boss and having to pick up that extra tool in
worms as well.
And worms, yeah.
You did get outstanding luck for
that
random encounters kind of across the board, though.
Yeah, that was very good RNG for the random encounters, and that centipede fight ended up being quite good, ultimately.
So traditionally, it used to be that we would hold off on final timing until after the credits for in-game time to stop ticking, but there's been a development maybe like 8 months ago or something where we just decided as a community that we kind of wanted to change the timing method to just be at the final point that you could actually die. Because all the rest of this is just the credits and final stuff, so there isn't really any danger of something going wrong. So we decided that exiting the ship was a fine place to cut it off. Yay for improving my 3:07 time without actually running the game anymore.
Yeah,
Just
congratulations.
Got better with age.
Yeah, it used to be that the sub 3 was the I actually used 3 quotation marks for sub 3. The sub 3 was the time to go for. 3 hours after the end of credits, and you save for the final time. But the in-game timer in this game really isn't that consistent. And it's not like we don't allow multi-segment runs, not like
The in-game timer is
save and quit.
The in-game timer is relatively consistent for certain scopes, is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Right.
as you mentioned, there's certain strategies. Like for example, people were like, "Oh, well, why don't we just make it like signal segment and stuff?" And that makes it really unapproachable for new players at the time because of the micro Uzi reset. Having real time also helps with things like I mentioned plywood paused during the worms fight to kind of avoid some hits. That is a strategy that you couldn't really use if you did strictly by game time because you'd be manipulating the game timer. So like by keeping it RTA, it kind of stinks in some aspects, but it also makes it more approachable for people and allows for a wider variety of strategies to be used for easing people into the game.
Mm-hmm. My PB personally is a 244.11, and the record by Professor Palmer is a 238 flat. But if you're starting out with this game, you'll probably end up at around like probably like a 310, 305, somewhere around there, starting out. But you'd be surprised with how easily you can make improvements in this game just with smarter movement, knowing the route, and of course having good luck. Always a nice factor, which we saw some pretty nice luck in this run overall. So yeah, this is going to be the last game of the marathon, everyone. I came in 6 minutes under estimate, which is pretty nice.
What are your thoughts on fundraiser at large? And actually, before that, what can we expect Plywood to be doing in the future on his stream?
For me, I actually am not sure what the next move is since I've been doing this marathon practice, but I would like to come back to this game and go for some of the NG Plus stuff, since I think that's a little bit easier to optimize than New Game. Though I do think New Game is the superior category for this game. A lot of fun, and more Metal Gear Solid stuff. Looking to improve my times in MGS1 and continue to make science tutorials and guides for that game. And as far as RPGs go, I'm looking to get into Saga Frontier, another Squaresoft game, and learning one of the stories in that game. Where that game has enemy dodges, and your run speed is actually almost too fast. You run super fast in that game, so look forward to that in terms of the RPG stuff. How about you, Turbo?
Sort of in the air for a lot of stuff right now, but probably do a bunch of Castlevania speedrunning stuff in preparation for a project I've been doing for that. But any thoughts on TFA at large, or?
I think we have the subject of TFA2 with us, who can say a few words since this is the end of the marathon. So I'll let you take it away, Python.